The one with the invitation is the 21st episode of the 4th season of Friends. This is directed by Peter Bonerz, and as always, there will be spoilers as I talk about this episode, but there's not really a lot to spoil. When I say what I'm going to say, I do so first by mentioning that this was released in the 1990s, where we didn't have on-demand content, and I'm assuming Friends was released on VHS pretty quickly, but even then I imagine it wasn't in as many households as it is now. So the use of many clips from previous episodes now is incredibly boring, but at the time, when people didn't binge watch things as regularly, and as I said, people maybe didn't have quite easy access to the VHSs, so these are episodes they might not have seen in a while, it would have been a different experience. But if, like me, you've watched Friends over and over and over again, and you binge watch it frequently, because that's the age we're living in, this kind of episode feels like a cop-out. So what I'm going to say maybe isn't fair. They couldn't have predicted that one day all of this amazing content was going to be available on demand, whenever, wherever we wanted it. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I enjoy it anymore. This is basically a clip show with some fresh scenes. It starts off with Joey and Chandler discussing the fact that everybody's off doing their own things. Phoebe is having babies, Ross is getting married, and they suggest they should do something, and they suggest climbing Mount Everest. But Phoebe comes into Central Park and reveals that it's very expensive, and I had a Google of this just now, and I didn't realise there were so many rules and restrictions just to be allowed to climb Everest. Not that I was going to climb Everest anyway, but that is pretty interesting. We then get in with the main narrative. Emily and Ross are writing their invitations, and Emily says, "So you invited Rachel then?" And her tone isn't necessarily bitter, but when she tells Ross that in her opinion it would be weird to have an ex-lover at her wedding, there is a suggestion, in my opinion, that she doesn't really want Rachel there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's certainly what I'm getting from it. And she tells Ross it's completely up to him, which is, of course, the right thing to say. And Emily goes off to make some Earl Grey, and Ross looks deep in thought, and then we get 6.5 minutes of flashbacks. And this is obviously when it gets a little bit, not boring as such, because the clips are fine, the clip selection is good, but as I said, when you binge watch this content again and again, watching these clips isn't really a recap. It's not a refresh, because it is fresh in our minds still. And yeah, the clip selection is okay. Bearing in mind, this is only season 4. So it's not like we have the full 10 seasons of Ross and Rachel or anything to call upon. We do have, in theory, quite a small selection of episodes to choose from, but that being said, their relationship is quite complex, and judging this as objectively as possible, let's say I'm watching this in 1998 and I haven't got the VHSs or whatever, I do think it does do a good job of recapping. It does help to highlight that their relationship has been an absolute roller coaster. We get a lot of the highs and a lot of the lows, and it's very well done. So I have to kind of judge it in two ways. Watching it now, is it an interesting episode? Not really. Watching it at the time, I imagine it would have done the job. So we get 6.5 minutes of the flashbacks, and then Ross is at the mailbox. He's posting all of the invitations. Seems like a tremendous waste of stamps, but nevertheless, he's posting the invitations, and then he pauses on Rachel's, and then we cut to another one-clip flashback. Really felt unnecessary to do that. And then we see him posting Rachel's envelope, Rachel's invitation. We then cut to everybody else getting their invites. Chandler and Joey are there, Phoebe and Monica. And then Rachel comes in and finds her invitation in the pile of post. And she says she doesn't know if she's going to go. And then we get 5.5 minutes of clips of flashbacks, and by this point I just felt like this was completely unnecessary. But again, it's a product of its time, but watching it now, these are clips that I've seen so many times over that I didn't, and I imagine most Friends fans don't really need these recaps. But again, not the episode's fault, but I can't pretend to enjoy those moments except for one bit. But I feel like this clip should have been the one that came just before Ross posted Rachel's invite. And it's the one from the episode where he's broken up with Julie and he says, "It's always been you, Rach." I think that would have been the perfect way to end the montage of clips just before he decided to post out her invite. But that's not where they decided to put it. But personally, I think that would have been a better option. We then see Rachel hovering over whether she's going to tick on the invite, will attend or will not attend. And then it cuts to another flashback. It's the one with the prom video. Actually a decent clip selection because it's really the first time Rachel acknowledged how she felt about Ross. So I don't mind the clip selection, but it just felt really unnecessary to have all of these clips and then a brief pause, then another clip, and then back to the new footage. And then ultimately we see Rachel ticking the will not get married box, and Monica comes over and sees this, and Rachel says, and I quote, "It's Ross. How can I watch him get married?" And I feel like in that moment, she's admitting to herself exactly how she feels about the situation. And we really see this vulnerability and this rawness of emotion that she's not dealing with it. And it's definitely an emotional moment. And then we end with a bit of comedy with Chandler and Joey, and they're talking about renting videos in the London hotel to watch the videos of the museums rather than going to the museums. It's a light-hearted way to end things. Friends rarely ends on a negative or depressing note. So I understand why they did that, but part of me feels like they should have ended it with Monica and Rachel because that was a pretty powerful penultimate scene. But I don't mind the ending. I just think that would have been a lot more impactful. But that aside, it's a fine episode. But even as a product of its time, I don't think we needed half an episode of clips. In fact, by my calculations, I specifically wrote down 12 minutes of clips, and then we have 2 extras, the one with the prom video and the one just before Ross posts the invite. So we're talking over half of this episode is made of prior clips, and I don't think that was necessary. I don't think we needed that many. It just, for me, as somebody who doesn't really like clip shows in general, and then when it's a clip show of a show that I've seen many, many times, I'm not a fan. But I think even in the 90s, I don't think we needed that many clips, or I don't think the clips needed to be that long. A lot of the clips extended way longer than they needed to. We could have shortened each clip down and still got the message across. So I don't think this is perfect. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, even for the episode in the 90s. But obviously watching it now is a very different experience when you've seen these many, many times over. And I'm sure that many Friends fans will agree. Maybe not. Maybe everybody likes these clips. But for me, I've seen them so much that if I want to watch those clips, I will watch that episode. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. It's not the best episode. We have a couple of decent moments. But in general, the one with the invitation is never going to be an episode that I will seek out to watch.